Is that something that resolves, or is it just something that stays?
It stays. That pumps him up every time. But
That's what you need.
sorry about that short break there, guys. Finally got Mr. Brian Hammond back in studio. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
This is what, your fourth, fifth time now?
This is 4.
So
This is
I'm just gonna get
yeah.
a plaque for you and just throw it up on the side at this point.
I want like that we get the mug club up there or something. Yeah, no, it's good to be here. Sorry to hold things up. I was investigating the super fun. What do we call it? Is that called ride share? I don't even know what they call that.
Rideshare, Ubers. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
As long as you
was
didn't have a
horrible.
robot driving car getting you here.
Called
So
for
blame it on the robots.
Called for 4 rides and then eventually ran to get my own vehicle. So, Viva Pittsburgh.
But no, for y'all that stayed with us between the break, as you guys know, now we're talking about depression. I think easy kind of segue from last week's episode, which was extremely heavy. And the reality of that situation, too, is, ironically, super freaking depressing.
Mm-hmm.
But before you got here, I basically gave him the rundown. Everything about our profession, from start to finish, I mean, between the hours, the isolation, and just, we talked about it before, I mean, simple things are just going to the bank and having that compressed window of time before you even go to work being basically a 2-hour period to get everything you need to get done for the week. And then you just go right back into the shit.
Yeah.
Everything about it is just crappy. And then you're talking about professional growth and the lack thereof.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks.
I think what I'd say is every part of it's crappy if you don't absolutely accentuate the best pieces of it. And since most places don't, then yeah, you're left with depressing. And it's I was thinking about it because we had a pregame on this yesterday, and I mean just over a long time of like working together and hanging out and having like, the late night beer or something. But I think the thing that gets lost is that yeah, it's depressing, but we keep coming back. It's not just because we're predisposed to abuse, but in some cases, I think a lot of people are. If you're, I had a conversation with Terry, my wife, last night. Must have been right before you arrived, and we were talking about kind of going over the outline, which I don't know if you mentioned that as you were writing the outline, you were becoming depressed.
I did. I addressed the fact that after bullet point after bullet point, I was just like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and
there's no escape.
Yeah. Well, and they, I think but what she said was, was kind of interesting to me. She said, the first piece was, you've got the depression rate, the, suicide rate and all that is just under these high intensity jobs that are, EMTs, nursing, childcare, and, that the difference in some cases for those professions is at least they get to feel that they're making a really important difference in the world. And you might not feel that way if you're, just hustling Cabernets to like a bunch of suits, who are playing a game of grab ass with the lady that you're working with.
Yeah.
It can be hard. And I think that's why it's really important to kind of try to find a way to circle back around and find a better way to crack the nut. The other thing she said was, we were kind of breaking it down, and I said, you do take a lot of, there's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And a lot of you'd have to say, honestly, it's a lot of unnecessary stress. People in other aspects of, maybe when it costs a hell of a lot of money, the stress is a little more literally earned.
Yeah.
If somebody's spending $1,000 to eat this dinner, you better step to a little bit quicker. But I've worked at a lot of places where it's a really low ticket item and you're still, really under the gun.
Yeah.
It is harder to justify. But I think that, she said something to me that kind of blew my mind. It hadn't even occurred to me as, I said, well, for years and years we work in these environments and that you're going to face the pressure you put on yourself, the pressure of just being under constantly refreshing short timelines and deadlines. But then on top of that, your supervisors, you may very well be subjected to, and you should generally expect to be subjected to some measure of verbal abuse, or at least a lot of discipline, usually borderline into or going way deep into verbal abuse, and then in some cases physical abuse. I mean, I've been afraid that, or I've been convinced that I've had supervisors who would probably, take a shot at me or throw a pan at me. And I don't think, I circle back and I haven't had a lot of physical altercations, but I've witnessed plenty. And part of the reason is just because I tried to avoid it. But she's listening to me say that, and she's heard like my commiserating over the years. But looking at it just from the distance, like kind of going up to space and looking at it, she's like, most people don't ever get screamed at their job. She's like, I've never been yelled at my job. Yeah. Which I can actually debunk, because I'm sure I yelled at her when we worked together for a short period of time, which is terrible. But I mean, she's saying that,
I think it's the thing. You can't really get any escape then, too. I mean, from back of house, we've all kind of had that one chef that's just complete maniac.
Yeah, that one guy.
So that's like, all right, you walk around eggshells on that, you're just like, all right, and you're already putting yourself under the gun too, which is, we've talked about this a lot of times too, just that self-imposed kind of standard to where you already got yourself under the magnifying glass.
Sure.
Just like, don't make a mistake, don't do this,
right.
This needs to be perfect.
Yeah, you already want to be
then
perfect.
You got somebody already breathing down your neck, so you're just like, Jesus Christ. And it's
right.
something prophecy in a way, too, because then you're ultimately going to make a mistake because you're just overthinking things. And then from service standpoint, then you're going out there and you're going to have just a complete stranger treating you like a piece of shit, and you're like, what the hell did I do to deserve this?
And and you might take that abuse even if you behave perfectly. I mean, a lot of times it comes down to the attitudes in the day that your supervisor or your guest went through, and those things tend to kind of have a domino effect where they feed into each other. So it's tough. I think that in looking through the your pregame on this, which was really helpful, because I've actually not been in as deeply immersed for the last few months even, but getting ready to start a new situation and kind of re-up. I'm looking at that saying like, oh my God, why would you re-up? Let alone, more to the point, why would I ask other people to do it? And I think the answer starts to become because you want to see it done differently. And I think that there's a naivete to it, but I think that you should have. I think that there's a inherent lack of optimism, an inherent lack of belief that things can change. And that's a sad piece of our business, because
well, it's like anytime you go to a new restaurant, you're gonna hear it no matter who's training you. It's like it's like you hear it. It's like any restaurant. You know how it is, and you hear that, and that was literally like that's the bit, guys. Like you hear that numerous times. It's like, you know what you're doing. Like, okay, here you go. Yeah. And minimum training, and ultimately, no matter where you go up or down the ladder, there's always going to be shades of each restaurant in every single one, to where it just evolves, it changes ever so slightly.
And there are some outliers, and they're so I think it's I wouldn't expect it to come from in capitals, the industry at large, but I think for people that have positive experiences in hospitality, certainly from a guest perspective, and I suppose from a media perspective, but really from hospitality employees' perspective, is to say, hey, I've seen another way, and it's great, and we should celebrate it, and we should there are standards that we should aspire to, other than spotless glasses and and perfect temps on steaks or whatever, whatever silliness you want to apply to it. Those things are fleeting and less important. And I guess come back to the ride out of it, maybe first get a little deeper into how what can be bad. But when I think part of the reason you don't hear as much about the great places out there, and in my opinion, they are certainly a lot fewer, but the places that really do it right from a perspective of supporting their employees and giving them an opportunity to shine, and taking a multi-dimensional approach to hospitality, not just towards the guest, but towards the people that make it happen. One of the reasons I think you don't hear a lot from them is because they don't leave. You don't cross paths with them, because like you find that place and you stay. I had one. I mean, I've had a bunch of jobs that I'd say, I like that job, But I had one place where I felt like, man, this place really does it right, and it was hard to leave. But I'll sing the praises of Frontera, Topolo, and the whole empire, that whole Rick Bayless scene forever, because
Well, it seems like anything you've told me about that, which you've always spoken shades of that on the show, but just in our personal conversations, it seems that they completely embodied that community and that family aspect to it. It's like, all right, now you're part of this organization, you're part of this, like, and I think it's a lot of just transparency too, of like, I'm sure Bayless was very transparent of what he wanted, what he expected, and like, here's our mission, here's our goal, and then welcomes you into that. And if you got it, and there you go.
A big piece of it there was, I came into that group from a previous experience that had been really tough, and it took a long time. They were very serious about, and the minutia is not the thing. It's the overriding like system.
Yeah.
But that's not a place where you chef everybody. Rick is Rick. He's not chef, and it took me months to just break the habit of chefing people. And it's fine. I think doing the chef thing's fine. But what was important there was that there were clear values about, that you're not going to be shouted down. You are going to be corrected. You are going to be shown, guided. And then there would be times, where it was clear that we had a mission not just to express the really amazing things about Mexican food and Mexican culture, which really was pervasive because we had so many. I mean, for me as a gringo in that kitchen, and a fair amount of non-Latino employees, but the majority of employees were of Mexican descent. The pride that they felt that we were celebrating that culture and pushing that forward, even that we'd see that when we'd go to Mexico, or the fact that they'd take the time to bring us down there. You start to feel connected and tied to the menu. You feel tied to the things that you're selling. You feel tied to the fact that you're connected to a broader culture, and you're tied to a mission and our mission was to bring that across. Yeah. And then there's so many different ways that would get reinforced. And don't get me wrong, an imperfect place, an imperfect system, but an amazing place and an amazing system. And
there's still something to aspire to essentially with it. You guys all had a common goal, and
yeah,
you guys are on the same page, which
and they're really good about sharing the successes, instead of just I think those mentalities of like you're as good as your worst service and all that. Yeah. There's a value to saying let's not get caught up in our the what's the flip side of that is like success is a poor teacher or something. But I mean you have to have balance, and to me balance means you have to. If something's not right, then it should be corrected. But if something's right, if something is right, then it should be held up to light. It should be used as an example, and in a lot of cases, it should be celebrated. I think that's when you start to lose things like that, all of the other things about the hospitality industry that that become cliche and that we do take for granted, hard hours and being away from your family and no holidays and the isolation that the business can give you, those things are all kind of survivable if you believe, if you believe in it. And but when you start to eliminate and you start to remove those little structural pieces, if I lose the thread of belief, things that maybe I'd tolerate at 19 years old or 22 years old, I'm a lot less likely to tolerate at 34 years old or at 39 years old.
I think that's you're hitting the nail on the head on that point, because it's still very fine margin, and those little stabilities we do have, as like you kind of would hint at that too. When people at good restaurants, they stay, but ultimately it's still a huge turnover rate. And you had the experience at Topolo, probably one of the best restaurants I worked at. Nothing at all cuisine-wise compared to Topolo, but St. James Gate, it was in the Sands Casino. Mm-hmm. The chef there, Willie Romero, took everybody under. The only restaurant I ever worked at to where front of house, back of house, all on the same page. Everybody, we all go out for drinks together constantly, have each other's back, very family-oriented. But, you lose one or two guys, and it was like, we'd always be like, man, it's not the same. And you're talking, that's one or two employees, but that dynamic just shifts, and it's, it still moves on, but you're just like, oh, man,
Well, again, I think that there was something that in the pregame for this, and really looking at it objectively, not having a day-to-day examples that you get tied to the person instead of the position, and that has dangers and it has values in different directions. But I think about how many when your hours are so different than everyone else's. The only people that you can really, really tie yourself to are the people that have the same hours.
Yeah.
If my wife is 9 to 5, now most of the people she knows and socializes with, you might join a kickball league or something, and you're all 9 to 5.
Yeah.
If you work in hospitality, there aren't a lot of other industries, even, let alone other restaurants, let alone where you can really start to build those.
Well, we can do
connections.
like darts at Donahue's. So
Yeah, but usually what happens is you build those relationships inside the restaurant, or inside the group, and even especially that we have so much competition between one restaurant and another, it starts to become very limited very quickly, and that the way that we form those bonds, one of them is by commiserating after work and talking about what we go through. But I mean, the main thing is, and we've talked about this, it's how you build those bonds in the first place. When you really work hard and you go through hardship and stress together, that's those intense experiences of in quotes being in the trenches, that builds bonds quickly, because it really shows like the measure of somebody when they're it allows us to cross boundaries of
well, it creates teamwork out of basically stress, adrenaline, and necessity, really.
Necessity will tie you together, and then all of a sudden you find yourself really really connecting with somebody, and they're a shift away from being out of your life forever. And listen, everybody goes through that. People come and go at jobs, but it happens faster for us, and we're more isolated in our relationships. So when you lose somebody, you're losing more than just it's not just like losing Bob in accounting. It's like if I'm working in a position and that I've been in for 2 years, which is like a lifetime in this business, and all of a sudden my Sue leaves, and he's somebody that I really respect. That's a great loss. And when you're already kind of on the razor's edge, that's you got to be careful about how much you take away. I think that if you spend too much time accepting that you can get by without so many things, you build yourself like very, very, you can build yourself in a very, very strong way, but you might be very narrow. It's like a I don't know, like a piece of steel that's a millimeter wide.
Well, before you got here, Darren, I'm all like I addressed even just the kind of nightly routine, and you addressed it too with just the partnerships and everything else you form, and the companionships you have, and how short-lived they can be. And I addressed just that idea of you come home, you're just worn out, and that physical conflict though you have, because your body's just fatigued. You can barely get off the couch. You're just like, wow, like I want to go to sleep right now, but then your mind's it's just wired. You're just like, holy crap, and it's going 100 miles an hour.
Adrenaline has to be processed. It's a strong chemical.
So I think that's one of the worst parts then, because that's why all of us end up going out, because it's like we know we're going to be up anyway, so let's just go out and try to drink ourselves into a tired state. It makes it a bit easier.
I think part of it is that you want to be around people that understand instead of sitting in a quiet house, and part of it is alcohol is a depressant, and that kind of counteracts that like uncomfortably high level of stimulation that you're feeling at an hour that you're already counting the hours of sleep you're not getting. So that's tough. And in the meantime, you're also catching judgment from folks about that you're already up too late and you're already spending too much time out there. So and then there's cumulative effects of that kind of alcohol use and drug use for folks that get into it. And it's scary, because even if you take out alcohol and drugs, which I definitely want to touch on, but even just I'm thinking about now, like just the diet portion of just eating that late, and then just the sleep cycle on your feet all day, and how many calories like you really just don't even put back in your body, but you throw something in there. You're not like
everything's out of whack.
The Whole Foods raw bar is like not kicking at 3 a.m. downtown. It's just not going on. So your options become limited. You start eating a lot more, gas station cuisine or something.
Wawa was my go-to.
Well, Wawa for sure. And I think that there's a measure of, you think about when you're younger too, folks that gravitate or wind up in hospitality, some by chance, some gravitate towards it, and then those tend to be oftentimes, a lot of times, the folks that are willing to put up with weirder hours and more stress. Like you generally you kind of term out quickly unless you're willing to put up with a certain amount of things.
Yeah.
But then also, it's like, you think of some of the bad habits that you might pick up. Some people with bad habits wind up in hospitality, and some people wind up in hospitality and get bad habits. I started the first time I ever started smoking, and I resisted it forever.
Honestly, I don't even think I do smoking on here. It's one habit I never picked up on that,
which is kind of miraculous. That's probably because you like being a wrestler or something. I don't know. but I mean, for me, I can remember very clearly when I started smoking and why. My father had been a smoker, and I hated it. He quit, and I was like really glad. I never was going to be a smoker. Hung out with a ton of kids that did, and it just never had any attraction to me. Working in restaurants, you could not literally get a break. They'd mandate you'd have these breaks that you 2 15-minute breaks and a half-hour lunch. No, I never took any of those. Nobody ever did, except the one time I worked for a union. And so you'd finally realize, like, how does this guy get off the line? Oh, he's taking a smoke break. If you don't have a smoking addiction, you don't even get a 5-minute break. So finally, I just said, then I smoke, and it was almost like prove it. And I was like, had to like spark one up for the kitchen manager or something. I started smoking so that I could get a few minutes to just sit and take, like, I need a breather, and like that breather has to be full of smoke to qualify in hospitality. And it's a shame, and then that led to, I've had to quit a few times, but that's hospitality introduced. And we all make choices, but you have to. If you look at it honestly, there's just some things are a lot more. Some things are more available, more prevalent, less discouraged, less punished, and in a lot of cases, quite encouraged. I was reading one of those things online, or somebody talking about their employer, and they're like, this wasn't the best, but it was really great that they let us hang out late and have shift drinks.
Yeah,
you're like, hey, good job tonight. We're not going to pay you well, but we will give you free beer. Like, what do you think is going to start happening? Like, people equate a good job to alcohol. It's Pavlovian. That's it. It's one of the. You do poorly, go out and drink to get rid of it. You do well, drink to celebrate.
Well, it's one of the things that I think leads to this too, and everything's connected, and naturally, it's we all start at a young age, and that kind of party culture and the aspect of like, oh, this is cool, this is hip, and 18, 19-year-old kids, you want to stay out late, you want to drink and party, and like it's fun, and you still are also making a significant chunk of change.
Right, it's very permissive,
and it's like, all right,
and you're still
awesome.
At work.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like, oh, this is super, super cool. But then when you actually start growing up and you got bills and everything else, it's just like, all right, well, this isn't as much fun. I can't stay out as late. This is detrimental to other goals I have.
Right.
But then you also start looking at it just from that plateau. Professional plateau that's in it, and you're just like, well, what am I gonna do here? Can I be a server my entire life now? Right. Can I be a cook my entire life now? Can I do the chef thing and hopefully get Sue, hopefully get exec and move on, like
run a hotel or something? And well, and the funny thing is, because the industry will you will do all these things, and the minute it's done with you, you're done.
Exactly. That fear of falling back down the ladder and like hitting every single rug on the way down is terrifying, because you're like, wow, I've already been here. This is Groundhog Day, and this is not fun.
Yeah, the only thing worse than coming up is going down.
And I think that's the scary thing. And then you look at it then too, I think that's where the drugs and alcohol really come in then, because as you mentioned before, the competitive nature. And I don't know anybody really in this industry, very few that don't drink. But I mean, you talk about the drugs. Well,
most of the ones you do are because they're in recovery.
True. And then
like what an amazing like amount of strength and discipline it shows to be able to stay in the industry. Because I know a good amount of folks that said, I gotta clean up. That means I gotta get out of this. Yeah. I gotta stop being in a place where this is happening all the time. So the folks that stay in and do that, I mean, like huge tip of the cap. Yeah. That is an amazing amount of like self-honesty and discipline to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And then with the competitive nature, though, of it and all that, you end up looking towards other drugs. I mean, speed, coke, everything else
Yeah.
to keep that edge on and keep pushing. And I think from backhouse standpoint, it's one of those things to where we're going through so much shit on a daily basis and on a daily shift. It's one of those things you just keep your edge. And then I think more fine dining in the upper echelon of restaurants, that margin of error is so slim. It's one of those things where it's just you need something to kind of make sure you feel on point. And a lot of folks end up leaning towards that way. And naturally, again, you do that for a prolonged period of time, it's going to have issues. But all of this again, I mean, all your support systems then fall back, and then when you're dipping into that, you're going to erode those naturally just from habits and everything else, and limit yourself. So then you're forcing yourself even more of a pocket of isolationism, and we're already starting in a profession that isolates us. And I think that's the scariest part, and I think a lot of folks end up going down that rabbit hole. And at that point in time, if you're in upper echelon restaurant and you hit that wall, as you said, it's scary falling all the way back down.
Yeah.
I think that's where you see a lot of this depression, where you either are, late 20s, mid 30s, 40s, and you've been doing the same thing for a long time. You're like, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah.
Or you're coming back down, and it's just like, shit.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing about the underreported piece of the positive aspects of some of that vice is that a coping mechanism, there's a positive aspect to a coping mechanism, because, like, coping is important. The problem is when your coping mechanism becomes, life support, or, a crutch, and then a prosthesis, and then a life support system. Yeah. But it's an unnatural environment, and that a lot of those things, it's not a coincidence that all this stuff exists for people. These are products that are already on hand, so you can introduce that, and the one-upsmanship and the kind of like macho, or what's the masochistic culture of service, is that we're proud if we've gotten beaten harder. Yeah. We're proud if we've done more covers. We're proud if I've got a bigger burn or cut than you do. We're proud if I worked through 300 covers for brunch and I drank more the night before. Yeah. You start to set these like ridiculous measures that the other people in your life look at and say, the responsible people look at and say, like, what's the matter? Like, this is supposed to be over. And then you feel bad, you feel shame, because you feel it, and you have an otherness, a different nature to what you do. So yeah, it's another way to kind of continue that the isolating nature of what we do, and also to put us in a different place. When you're in a service role, you are different. You spend most of your time naturally subservient to someone else who, you don't. People wouldn't treat. I know that there are exceptions. I'm not trying to say that hospitality is the only place that it happens, but I know hospitality well, and I can say that, it's an expected and a given that you are supposed to take like a really serious level of hostility and abuse from in a kitchen standpoint. You take it from your superiors. In your front of house roles, generally speaking, you get some from your superiors, and the rest you get from your guests. To have that kind of sustained you having to constantly be orienting your perspective to the fact that, I remember a great pep talk from a restaurant I worked for a short period of time here in Pittsburgh, where the GM said before a Mother's Day service, which makes it even more hysterical, he's like, everybody was tired, and it had been a really long weekend. There's a lot of stuff in town, and everybody had really been pushing hard. And it was a very hard restaurant to work. And the GM said to the entire front of house staff, literally minutes before we opened, like, I know nobody wants to be here, but let's keep in mind what we do doesn't matter. And I think he thought somehow in his twisted mind that he was saying something like, maybe to take the stress off that what we do doesn't matter. But he's like, hey, listen, I know everybody's been working really, really hard. And I see the flow chart in my head of all the different ways you can go towards something better. Yeah. And I was like, I know everybody's been working hard, and nobody. I thought it was
going to be like, it's somebody's mother's special day kind of nonsense. Like,
there's
cool,
something. I know everybody's working hard, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. Yeah. I know everybody's been working hard, and you're giving people great experiences. Yeah. I know everybody's really been working hard, and no one wants to be here. Yeah. But let's remember, what you do doesn't matter. Now get out there, Tiger. I want to laugh, but you're also like, for me, I was, in my 30s. I had a lot of experience. I had a fair amount of perspective, and that was for me a placeholder to pay some bills, like while I was working on something else. Like
Yeah.
it was definitely like a very finite situation. You know, there are 19-year-old young women in that meeting. There are 29-year-old fellows that are, you know, at a crossroads figuring out what they're going to do in their career. Like this is I mean, and that's so. And the funny part is, we're talking about like some of the lowest and worst moments, and this is a restaurant that's considered an excellent restaurant. But the funny thing is, when you sit and you were thinking about like, and this is a big piece of it, all of these negatives, it's kind of saying like these are the things that you get used to. Now, but before, how did we get to tolerating every form of negativity? Just to get to zero would be a pretty Herculean effort.
Yeah.
No one would even consider saying, well, what if you actually created a positive environment? What if you actually were encouraging? And I mean beyond,
I think that's the tough
beyond
thing.
like that window dressing and the nonsense that makes it worse.
It's similar to what Celine said last week, even with sexual harassment and the idea of creating not necessarily HR department and the PC kind of way to approach it and professional term for it, but
Sure.
still that support group within the restaurant of being like, all right, this is standards. Like if you guys are feeling down this or that, like it's still having to lean in, but that's what it's tough because you create those personal friendships. Everybody's going this or that.
Sure.
So there's no outs to where you end up just creating your own kind of ways to make sure you don't fall in those ruts and you don't get depressed with that, be exercise and whatever else.
Yeah.
Sticking to your routine. But again, it takes so much self-discipline outside of work there too. You overly mentally at your like limit leaving work, and you're typically physically fatigued then too, to where it's just like it takes a lot of dedication just by yourself to be like, yeah, let's stick to this and make sure like I don't fall in those ruts and I see where I'm going. And it's much easier if everyone's on board and, as you said, with Topolo and have a set goal.
Yeah. It's funny of course a lot of it comes from it doesn't have to be, but it's very effective when it's top down. A guy like Rick is a really inspirational character because he believes in what he says, and he has so much natural enthusiasm that it just starts to infect you, and then it just gets into everybody, and it's you're allowed to be yourself, but it's clear that there are like these are certain things that these are core values of the place, and if you feel that you can align with them and become a part of that, it's a really special feeling. I had a few jobs that I really enjoyed, and usually it involved, in a departmental level, like I love this crew.
Yeah.
I love this kitchen crew right now. I like the menus we're working on right now. I love the product we're putting out. But then it's, there are other aspects of the job that are like you're fighting against or whatever. But so it's always helpful when it comes from the top, and institutionally it happens. But I think that the nature of the beast in general, as far as, and the longer people spend in it, you get the grizzly veterans, and folks become jaded, or they become more streamlined at what they do, and realize sometimes you start to say to yourself like, I can't get all my sunshine at night. It's like I can't just be pulling all this false light in, with my 7-month friends. And so you might keep the job, but you start to disengage. You get more into, your actual, maybe reconnect with your family, or you make some friends outside of work. Maybe you get married and you tie on more with your spouse, like tie more into their lives. And then all of a sudden, this person of great experience within the restaurant is disengaging from it, because you can only take so much before you have to start to protect yourself. And I think that I don't know where all the answers are. I mean, I endeavor to try, but for my own piece of it. But it does all feel like the smallest grain of sand. But I think that active mentorship, you have to also be willing and able to like sacrifice bits of your macho pride. And I don't know what I actually feel really ignorant to say. What do you call it when it's if it's ladies? Is it still macho? I don't want to like be gender inappropriate with that.
No, I'm not sure. I think any way you go with that, it would be it would not be PC at all at this,
Okay,
this stage. Because
I'll say
I mean,
but
even you go macho,
for
it'd be
whatever, whatever self-protective,
Yeah.
strong pride and strength measures we will take, male or female. You have to suspend some of that and be a bit vulnerable in order to like get any deeper than the very tough superficial level at what we do. And that's asking a lot. I mean, it really does ask a lot of everybody. It's a competitive environment from restaurant to restaurant. It's competitive within every restaurant from station to station.
Yeah.
You know, if you're 26 and you got a 19-year-old nipping at your heels on, you know, on the saute station or whatever, it's like, you know, there's you're not encouraged to show much vulnerability.
Yeah.
Compassion's a false word that they use as what you're supposed to show to your guests. You're supposed to anticipate their needs, you know, while completely subverting your own. So it's, I think, when you go through a sustained, you know, periods with that,
there's a lot of helping, and I think you're touching on a good thing, even with the 19-26-year-old comparison, to where it's you're all a team, and you're all, you know, making a product and creating this identity of service, and the entire experience, which we've talked about many times, but in an odd way, you're not really helping them. You just, it's a cognitive unit then to it. It's just like, okay, like, I'm taking you this far, but I had to do that because, like, you know, I was driving that way anyway. I wouldn't have done it like if I wasn't going that way. So get the hell out of my car. Like, and I think that's the odd reality then too, that competitive nature, to where it's just like, oh, if you are in a situation like that, in a kitchen like that, you're looking over your shoulder 24/7. It's uncomfortable to work in, no matter how you look at it. And depending on your support system outside of work, that's brutal.
I think in like those objective measures in a business that calls itself hospitality are tricky. When you introduce, you know, some things are objectively measurable, which are, you know, sales, profit, you know, food cost. And beyond that, things become a lot blurrier. And the way that they become, the way that you make them, you know, in quotes, measurable, is that you introduce formalized criticism, so reviews, Yelp, you know, whatever, anything that, you know, you can look at it and say like, oh, 83% of people like your restaurant. And you're like, wow, it's a low B. No, well, that's, you know, 83% of the people that use that app for that purpose said that, and who knows what's the percentage of people that vote. Do more happy people vote or more unhappy people? And, you know, but you get very tied up into this stuff, and then so you start to lose perspective and like kind of a broader, longer view. And I think that in our industry right now, something I'm not struggling with it right now. I'm anticipating my struggle with it because I've had it before, and I'm really trying to like steel myself for it and like build better internal practices. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I'm still like actively working hard to get ready. You know, how much you want to care about reviews, and you want to care about, you know, those kinds of things, because they can drive business, you know. And of course you want to have a receptive ear to criticism, you know, make sure that you're giving your guests things that they want. But there's way more than comes to you. Like, there's a lot of radiation that comes around those little vessels of actual useful information, and those things can be really harmful depending on how you deal with them. It's not healthy to listen to all of it. I mean, I've done that. It messes your head up in a bad way. It's bad to close it all out too. You know, you can't just put your head in the sand. So like, how do you strike the healthy balance? And in our world now, I can't imagine it would be any healthier. You know, I was coming up, started cooking at the end of the 90s, and you know, there were no social media or any of that stuff, you know, but you know, we had ways that we would measure ourselves, you know, what kind of property you worked at and where you were. But now, I mean, it's like you can pull instant feedback. Like, oh, this guy says he worked there. You cross-reference, Google the restaurant. What's its ranking in its city? What's the city's ranking in the country? What's it on, you know, Zagat? What's it on? You know, does it have a star? Does it have, et cetera, et cetera? We have so much more information that says so much less now, and I think that drives even more objective rationale to support, either what's good or what's bad about what's going on. And I think that for the few people that have success, we do work in a culture in general. People want what's fresh and what's new and what's exciting. It's hard. I mean, it is hard to get there, and anybody that's gotten there will tell you it's the hardest thing is not achieving a goal, it's maintaining. Like you get to the mountaintop, it's trying to stay there because everybody wants that tiny piece of real estate. And man, I mean, that'll wear you down. I mean, at that point, even success becomes, you have to start to orient yourself to the reality that there's not a dish or a review or a rating that's going to bring you to where you need to be. So it requires probably having some kind of perspective. We're not in an industry right now that wants to give you perspective, and I think some of that's very pointed. It's like old mechanisms to keep people in control, and that's I get it. It makes sense. It doesn't make it right, but without sitting here and trying to say we're trying to create a perfect society, then maybe it's time to think of like there should be some simpler things, simpler ways towards health, and I
think it comes down to honestly a lot of what we discussed in this show, and it ties back into it because a lot of things we talk about, we don't have any of the answers. It's bringing in problems and discussing them.
Yeah, we're just here to open the 86 wounds.
exactly. But like as you were saying too, with cross-reference and everything else, it's one of those things to where you come into an environment and people already have opinions as to that, hostile and all that, and that can be a difficult thing too. But at the same time, I mean, backside of it's like, all right, well, this guy's fraud, whatever else, and you don't want him around in the kitchen, whatever else. That's issue everything else. But in the sense of the depression area and all that and what causes it, it's still an idea, we talked about tip policies, the wage structure, the lack of professional development. Like, these are the issues that really, really hurt it. And the fact that the industry doesn't take itself serious to where we don't even treat ourselves as professionals.
Right.
To where it's just like, this vacates that isolationism. We can't talk to other family members and anybody outside of the industry because no one else relates to it, and it creates that fraternity aspect, which is terrible.
Right, and it also keeps us marginalized from everyone.
Exactly, and it's still those things where it's like, what can we do as an industry to improve it across the board, and ultimately all these issues then start eroding away. And I think it's still as simple as it is. Starts with addressing that it's a profession and that like we can create a career out of this, and that's a tough discussion to have with people outside of the industry. Yeah,
well, I think that maybe what's important then is, to start the process, you have to awareness is critical, and that that starts with self-awareness to say that
of not telling your guys before busy weekend and busy shift that what you're doing doesn't worth.
But or honestly, if I could see a really valuable pre-shift like coming even with those words, like, guys, like, nobody wants to be here, we're all worn out, and what we do doesn't matter. That's it. Everybody, we're going home. Like, it's over. Like, it's time to close the doors. Like, real estate's valuable in Pittsburgh. That, but, and that's what you should do if that's your attitude. But I mean, obviously, you're coming from a different perspective. You ought to sell, widgets, not sell something that you call hospitality. Because when you do that, it devalues the perception of the product. And if you can't sell what it really is, for what it really costs, then it'll never get to a good place. Because if you're going to work that hard, you're not going to be able to make the money. That does create an objective measure that's really hard to overcome. Like, if you're going to work your ass off and be expert, there's a difference between working hard and being. Hard work is admirable, and skill is admirable, and like commitment. And if you put all that together and you still can't scratch out a decent living, something's wrong. So the simplicity, the perceived simplicity of the product that goes into making what our product isn't food. Our product's not dinner. Our product is that overall hospitality. And there's a reason that it should cost the exact same raw product being prepared and presented by two different restaurants ought to cost two very different things.
Have you? This is kind of completely shifting gears.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had a chef, restaurant owner, any sort of managerial kind of coworker, anybody? Because I think you have it more at the trenches aspect of it. So when I was working alongside, like, hey, you okay? But really, a sous chef, anybody else being like, hey, if you're down this or that, like, take it easy, and actually showing any sort of just sympathy and being like, hey, we know it sucks, like, we got you, been kicking ass, taking names, and at least just numbing the pain in a roundabout way.
Well, yeah, and actually that's the hardest, the most like emotionally charged moments in my career are the few times that somebody reached out to me and I really needed it, because they'll say, like you're saying, I had a terrible run. I was having a lot of personal stuff. I was early 20s, living in California, super poor. I worked construction the day, I worked in restaurants at night. Then I finally had a break from some things, and I was going to culinary school, putting myself through culinary school, and then working in a country club at night. And it was rough. I carried my own natural depression into it from like being a kid, and and just the struggles you go through. And then I had a lot of things that were just happening in my life that were going badly, and it was just so tough. Had some good things going on for sure, but I think I just kind of like hit the end of my threshold for it, and then exhaustion. Exhaustion will do crazy things to your mind.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a really underrated aspect of depression on its own, just the physical piece of it, and it's really underreported. Is like sleep deprivation and poor quality of rest. It manifests as serious depression.
Yeah.
And
you need rest.
And we're in the industry that wants that, like, it will help to do that. I mean,
I think that's like
military and all that stuff. But I mean, if you are actually getting proper rest, that's it does change things. So, but anyway, yeah, I had a situation where I missed a day of work, and it was like I'd kind of gone off the deep end, and two guys I worked with at the country club showed up at my apartment. I think they must have sensed something was coming, and they checked in with me to see if I was all right. I was all right. I was I was kind of like, I was drinking too much. I kind of like, I just wasn't exhibiting like good judgment or like self-care. And I'd been hiding it. They must have just picked up on a thread. They stopped by my apartment, and they were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." I tried to pass it off, and they like, these are guys that I'd always just goofed around with, and but we really cared for each other, but we don't talk like that way. And then they finally said, "Is there something you need? Like, something's not right. Like, you never missed work." And they reached out and they said, "We're gonna give you, we want to give you some help and some latitude, and know that if you need to pull back, like, you can pull back and all that." And just in somebody like taking any measure of care and offering, like, it destroyed me. I was so overwhelmed with emotion because, like, in that moment of like somebody like reaching out, it was really powerful. And at the time, it meant a lot to me, but and it caused me to just kind of go back to the grindstone twice as hard. I can't let the people that are looking out for me think that something's wrong with me. I can't let that happen. I feel differently about it now, and I still appreciate it. It's still really meaningful. But I've had it happen, that somebody's reached out to me, and I've certainly reached out as a coworker, as an employer. And oh mercy, I think we get so caught in this that you don't even know how to take help after a while, because you've been taught that's
it's a weakness.
It's a weakness, and we can't have that. So I think that I think that having these whoever, and if anybody's listening, like, whoever decides to put together a group of mental health professionals that work late hours and like market to hospitality, you will be a millionaire in like a month. Yeah. Because there are so many people out there with need that feel that the resources aren't available, that feel that they've been like, marginalized by what they do. And then add in other components that might make this so much harder. In my time in Southern California and Chicago, if you're a migrant laborer, if you're not documented, if you're all of the other things added onto it. For me as a white male in Pennsylvania for a lot of my career, or in other states, but as hard as it can be, and without certain other things, they can really just be like multiplicative effects. It, I think the first thing anybody can do is you have to start at that personal level and say, first, I'm going to make a decision to value myself, what I do. I'm going to step forward and say, like, first, maybe not, no matter where you're working, that maybe you're not at a great restaurant, but you know what, I'm going to make myself better today, and tomorrow I'll be better than today. Yeah. And I'm also going to business as usual is not going to suffice. Yeah. For me, I think we need to, I'm going to like put myself out there a little bit. And you can't do this stuff and not get like some blowback, but in the long run, I think that one of the funniest things about hospitality when I got into it because it was a lot unlike school. Yeah. And I love that because I'd kind of had it with the formalized education, and I was just young and crazy and needed to like get into something else. Yeah. And it seemed like this chaotic environment, and it like matched what I felt in my mind. Yeah. And then eventually, when you want to get serious, you have to get into a more formalized cuisine, and you get training, and all of a sudden you find yourself in something that's way more structured than school. That's way more strict than school. It's way tougher than school. And because you get beer at the end of it, it's you don't see the connection. But so there you are in that environment. And the funny thing about it, you get the same. What's the thing I'm looking for? You get the same false narrative is fed to you. That's fed to you in school when you're a teenager, and they're like the permanent record. You make a mistake at 14, you're gonna ruin your life. Yeah. And you get that as a chef. You're 20 years old. Like, go to the wrong school, take up with the wrong chef, piss the wrong guy off, or mouth off to the wrong sous, or there's a million things. Make the wrong decision. I think of one job I took over another. Was that the biggest mistake of my life? Or no, I can see how some of that worked out. It's just these are fluid situations. We're in the business of, I think if you...
Well, I think that's what creates that dynamic and makes it scary is the fact that, again, there's not much room for error in what we do. Right. And it's not like you're committing so much of yourself. And as you said, too, like the self-discipline it takes to be in this industry and to make sure you are taking care of yourself and still taking your job seriously, though. Yeah. If you do feel you need to be making a wrong decision, or like you wasted a 2-year period of time, it's 2 years is not that long a period of time, but in this industry it's compacted, and it's crap, like it's I wasted exactly I wasted this much time, and now I gotta start from point A again.
Yeah, some of your deepest friendships in this business are way less long than
it's not
than
like
2 years.
You can shift gears and go from being mechanical engineer and then shifting in and just being like, all right, well, I'm just gonna shift a little bit to like electrical because it's same thing, I can still understand it, and like learning curve is not gonna be all that bad. It's not you can go from being a server and then it's like, all right, well, be an accountant now, guys. Catch you. Starting next week. Here we go.
Yeah,
it's not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that a piece of that really constant and, in my opinion, false narrative about what we do is that the stress and the pressure that you feel comes from that, like, we must be perfect, we must not make mistakes. And of course, mistakes are made every day, every service. But that.
I think it takes two is just the staff and ownership too to still get those support systems.
For sure, but you just can't count on that right now. I think it's incumbent on the people who are coming up. If you're making a decision that you think this is something you might do for a while, and I applaud the people that decide to do that. The changes are going to have to be, the changes have to be more than, like now hydrocolloids are okay and sous vide's a thing, and in a couple of years, French food will be the big thing in a year and all that. Like, it has to be the things that are more foundational and things that are actually like more important than that, which are, if you're going to still call it hospitality, then like, let's have some, I think that you have some hospitality for yourself, like little self-compassion to say that, hey, you know what? Yeah, I make a mistake. I can remember, oh my God, and I think of the conversations I've had with other coworkers and then like reports or employees. You can remember mistakes you made. Yeah. I can remember like a dish I screwed up 14 years ago, like it was yesterday. I could tell you exactly every piece of what was wrong with it, and it's funny, like it's hysterical, but
Old Sue still makes fun of me because I sent out a piece of raw chicken one time. Roasted chicken, and it was not done all the way in the middle. He still gives me shit about it to this day.
Of course, yeah.
So, Jesus Christ.
And I think that it's important to not make. It's important to be technically accurate. Of course, it's important to be consistent. You are going to make mistakes. If you feed thousands of people, there's going to be a mistake in there. And when there is, what you need to do is see it for what it is. If it's negligence, then that's something else. But if you make a mistake in, like, if you're applying your talent and you're applying your effort and you're in this environment under stress and you're doing all these things and you make a mistake, and this is the thing that I think that is the biggest missed opportunity in our industry, and that if, like, the higher ups could understand this, and I don't mean higher ups like my contemporaries, like single unit restaurant owners, because I think a lot of these guys know this, and they're under such an insane amount of stress just to try to compete and stay alive, that they're doing their best, and I think a lot of them are doing really well with it, but the bigger companies actively don't want to involve themselves in this thought process. Is that this is the moment of truth. You've inundated yourself in the business. You've worked your ass off. You've put in the hours. You've built technical skill. You're in the moment of, like, great stress. You've produced, and then suddenly you slipped up.
Yeah.
This is where it either goes well or it goes badly. If that's imprinted in your memory for the rest of your life, is something that you're just going to kick the hell out of yourself for. I have somebody in my mind right now. I'm thinking of myself, but I'm thinking of also of a friend and a former employee and a pal, somebody who I have a lot of respect for, who just cannot let himself off the hook for things, and it kills me, because there's a juncture there, and if you go just and make a turn the other way and you turn it into what it ought to be, or what I would like it to be, and what I think it ought to be, which is a learning opportunity.
Yeah. Made a mistake. What can I take from it?
Yeah.
What I do right, what I do wrong, and how do I avoid those mistakes again?
Right. And now I become a better chef. I become a better server. I become a better bartender, a better owner. That minute you make yourself better.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even mean that you'll never make another mistake. The only people that make no mistakes, the people that never fuck up, are the people that never engage. And we're going to put ourselves in, let's give ourselves a quick pat on the back and say, like, we're going to engage again and again and again.
Yeah.
And while we're in there, when we make mistakes, if we make them in good conscience and good faith and in good effort, then we're going to turn them into learning opportunities, and we're going to not destroy each other when it happens.
Yeah.
We're going to help each other. And we're also going to, like, let ourselves move on from it and to improve. That is such a sea change in the way of thinking. And I'm telling you, it is something that I actively have been working on for a decade, after a decade of going the absolute wrong way with it. And it's not, this is me presenting myself saying that it's done and that's how it goes. But I can tell you it's a better feeling. And the way that you come to it is, how would you advise a good friend who is in a similar situation? Would you say that, like, you made a small technical error once and you deserve to suffer for that? No, you'd say, well, why don't you move on and let's get back in the game. It seems obvious, but it's very much not the way that it's done.
Well, I think that's definitely a thing that happens more so back of house, front of house. I think depends on which echelon of the tier you're on as far as restaurants, fine dining, all that. And I think it's more because the militant aspect of back of house and under that microscope, and you just
another problem with the front of house is that things are a lot more subjective, because, like, if a guest isn't happy, it doesn't mean that a technical problem's occurred. It's easier to dismiss. You can go either way, and I think that it muddies the waters. But with front of house too, it's there's
a bit more immediate gratification that happens there.
Well, and
the back of house,
it only hurts. Those things only hurt as much as you let them hurt you.
Yeah.
And I think that if you start changing the quality of the engagement that you have, that this isn't if the amount of suffering that's possible, if the amount of, like, pain that I can feed you is endless, like, it is stress without limit, but the ceiling for earning and for credit is quite low. I think you just written a beautiful recipe for, like, a very depressed individual. I mean, like, literally depressed from the outside and depressed from the inside. But I think if you create an environment where, well, now we start to limit to a degree the amount of pain that I'm going to allow you to experience. Like, I can't get inside your head, but I can not compound it. I cannot become a magnifying glass of, like, the light of, like, critique on top of you.
I think it comes down to the awareness of understanding our profession, understanding that we have all these factors in play outside of work that we're going to beat ourselves up on. So creating the environment then too to where you still feel like you're in a petri dish essentially. Someone's just watching you and like you're doing your work, and if you make an error, then it's like, ah, shit, I'm going to get passed over. Like that's it. Like it's game over. And you can't quantify mistakes like that. And I definitely think that happens a lot more in back house, but even across the board, it's one of those to where if that does happen, someone does fall down that slope, then that's when all these other factors that are in play come in, and again, they just multiply by that, and it's a slippery slope thing. Because when you're just looking at a whole other different factors, and you're way off target, and it's like now you're forgetting why you came in and you're forgetting about the passion that brought you in this industry and whatever standards you brought with you as well.
Sure. Well, and it's funny while you're saying that, two things kind of occur to me on that spectrum. The one piece of it is taking it to the highest levels, the best restaurants and all that. The way that you get there is by, every detail is important, and everything that everything can be improved.
Yeah.
And I do agree. I think that is the thing. Those Michelin-starred places do what they do because they don't rest on their laurels with anything. Everything has to be just so. But I think that the it's not to say that like changing the narrative a bit from like a mistake is death to a mistake is a learning opportunity, and there are places at which that is the case. I mean, I've taken an insane amount of like really aggressive abuse for things that really are ultimately, and I don't mean they're not important, that it's not important every detail.
Yeah.
But I mean, I just can't imagine the things that you see like. They're just like their mental illness.
Yeah.
It's mental illness feeding into mental illness. It's one creating the next generation, and that is unforgivable in my opinion. But the other side of that is, and this is like really, you want to have. I think this is what I think is important. I think saying I want to create an environment. If I say I want to create an environment, we want to strive for perfection, and anything that goes outside of perfection will result in punishment, strict and harsh punishment. What you're doing is you're creating an environment where nobody can grow, nobody can introduce the humanity that hospitality is. At its nature, hospitality is about like guiding and protecting and serving. And you create an environment where a mistake can't be made. Mistakes get made all the time because you have no natural self left. I mean, I can think of, at one spot I worked where, I've never felt like I was always about to make a huge mistake because I wasn't even in my body. It was such an amount of intense stress that, like, when you hit the groove, like the runner's high, you never hit the runner's high if you're like, think you're going to just get the shit kicked out of you any second. Like, you're probably not getting the runner's high if someone told you, like, 16 trucks, 15 Pumas, 5 Tigers, and 63 Hawks might come down, also snipers at any time. Now, enjoy this mile.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You're like, you're just waiting for the abuse. And you're like, how long am I going to stay in this race? Am I going to finish? Am I going to make it on my own? Am I going to just get blown out, or am I going to quit? And if you're weighing all those things instead of weighing, the sugar, like, you're not having a good shift.
Yeah.
But I think the final piece for me, as far as like, if you wanted to take it out of just aside from doing better for the people around you, which ultimately is what this thing should be about, I think about some of the best experiences that I've had as a guest, and if a mistake in the kitchen is an opportunity for your chefs to grow.
Mm-hmm.
You think of an experience in hospitality when think about on the floor, something goes wrong for a guest.
Yeah.
Now, and there are exceptions, of course, but I'm saying as a general rule, something going imperfectly for a guest is a cringeworthy moment as an owner, operator, server, bartender, host, manager. Those are terrible moments when you realize something's been mishandled.
Yeah.
They're terrible. But it's a mistake. It becomes an opportunity. The fixing of a small error in a really attentive and caring way can win a guest in a way sometimes that you might never have gotten them.
Yeah.
They walk into your restaurant expecting excellent service and you give them excellent service, they're glad. They walk into your restaurant expecting excellent service and, some kid like, a young server's assistant makes a simple mistake He spills a glass of wine on the lady, which is actually more than a simple mistake. It's easy to do. And the way that you go above and beyond to take care of things, and that you step forward and you get in there and you show what you're about. I mean, that's a whole nother level, and I think that that shows as much skills of, if our only skills are opening bottles of wine, julienning, and dépouillaging our stock, then that's not something I don't need to. That's not a service I think anybody really needs to pay for anymore.
No, I'm with you there. It's you can't not teach from mistakes and all that, and that's the thing, and that's what we've talked about all night here, with the idea that it's already stressful. We're over under a microscope. You can't make it worse. And as a business owner, even as a coworker and a teammate, you have to acknowledge that. As I'm dying, you have to acknowledge that, and you have to give support where you see it. And at the same time, too, you have to acknowledge that we're all kind of going through the same thing, and you have to create that team unity no matter what the turnover is and all that. And I think that starts again with the business owner and the mission statement, and seeing that we're all on the same page. But with that, naturally, I mean, I think we're going a bit over time on this one. But
all right, well, I have to say, because I just had my crystallized moment of things.
Right.
I'll be super fast. But as we said, we're talking about being isolated, isolated in hours from our family, isolated from holidays, isolated from a lot of normal things. I think the ultimate isolation and kind of terrible moment in this thing is when you're taught to give care over and over and over, and that the most important thing in the world is how we care for other people in our service, and then you receive zero care. I think that's the biggest amount of cognitive dissonance that you can receive, and I think that there's no way that can't not fuck with your head and disturb you. But
no, as always, appreciate you coming on the show. I always enjoy these talks.
It's my pleasure.
Hopefully everybody out there, you guys enjoyed the show. Next week, I actually have Mr. Dan Gigler, good old Gigsy, back on the show. So Post-Gazette food and culture writer, so that should be good. Talk a little bit about he did a Dryuary. I think I'm just mispronouncing that.
Oh, okay. I know it. Oh, is this the no?
Yeah, no drinking for January. Yeah, he had to wait after the Steelers got knocked out by Jacksonville, though.
Giggs did that.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious on how he survived and managed with that.
I'll be tuning in.
But excited to have him on next week. But as always, want to thank Professor Conti and the Center of Media Innovation. Thanks Point Park University as well. And for all y'all listen, go ahead, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, get at us. Always following the YouTube channel. Always do a little bit of promos, everything else on there. But as always, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for the support. This is Neil Streebing, 86'd Life. And, of course, your favorite tune be good old Brazzmasters taking us out.